Welcome to the 5-part video series discussing important concepts related to installing SBM. As a review, in Part 1 we explored SBM architecture, components, and several installation strategies. This time we will get into the details about preparing the servers before installing SBM. Most of the information we will cover today is in the install guide found at docs.microfocus.com on the SBM page. Once you have this page open, make sure you are looking at the right version number for your installation, and then click Install. This is the install section of the guide. To begin, be sure to check the System Requirements page, which is also called the Platform Matrix. Here you will find a list of the supported operating systems, databases, and other technologies. Notice there are separate sections for the server operating system and the client operating system. We go down a little bit farther, you will find information about the mobile operating systems and the databases. Keep scrolling down to find information about all the different technologies. Make sure the new servers that you are building for SBM meet these requirements. Next, you will want to check the hardware requirements under Installation and Configuration, Pre-installation, and then Hardware. This page gives advice on CPU, memory, and disk space minimums. As a personal tip from me to you, I would never run a production server using these minimum recommendations. It's too small. This might be okay for a test server, but I promise you will not be happy with the results on a production server. Instead, take a look at the recommended requirements. I would use these more as your minimum for a production server. Faster CPU is better, more RAM is better, but this will get you started. Next, we'll take a look at the database preparation under Preparing Your Database. A complete SBM system is made up of several dozen database tables. We group these tables together and call them databases. For example, all of the runtime application tables are collectively referred to as the Application Engine database, and all of the orchestration tables are collectively referred to as the Orchestration Engine database. There are a total of 5 SBM databases. You can decide to bundle these SBM databases together or leave them separate. You will need to decide exactly how many SQL databases or Oracle user schemas you want in order to host these SBM databases. To explore the options, let's take a look back at the diagram we used in the first video. For this conversation, let's assume we are planning a system like this, with one test environment and a production environment. We have each of the different SBM databases listed out in our diagram. Notice there are 3 in the test environment and 3 separate ones in the production environment. There are also 2 that make up the repository. As a reminder, regardless if we have one production server or if we have 2 environments like this diagram, there will always only be one repository database. So in total, for a setup like this, we would have 2 databases for the repository, and then 3, 4, 5 that make up the test environment, and 6, 7, 8 to include production. So you could create these 8 databases in SQL Server or Oracle or Postgres, and that would be fine. It is most common to bundle some of these databases together. Let's look at this combine diagram. With this idea, we bundle the 2 databases for the repository together, and we would create one SQL database or Oracle user schema to hold both of these, and we would create one test database for the runtime, and it would combine all 3 of these SBM databases together. And then we would have another one for production runtime database combining these 3. That would give us in total one database for the repository, one for the test environment, and one for the production environment. That gives you a total of 3 SQL Server databases or 3 Oracle schemas. Once you have decided how many databases or user schemas you want to have, don't forget to also decide where you want to store them. Remember, you will only have one repository database, so you will need to decide if it will be stored on the same Oracle or SQL Server as the test environment, or if it will be stored on the same SQL or Oracle Server as production environment. You could have it on a third environment, but that is not very common and not necessary. Let's change our diagram a little to show this visually. In this example, we decided to host the repository with the test environment. This means the test environment will host the repository component as well as the repository database. We could have just as easily chosen to host the repository on the production server. In that case, we would have stored the repository database on the production server database. Either choice is fine. There's no right or wrong answer. Once you have decided how you want to organize the databases, take a look at the checklist for that database. SBM supports SQL Server, Oracle, and Postgres. Let's take a look at the SQL Server checklist as an example. Each of the checklists start with explaining which client and driver is needed in order to connect SBM to that database type. Then there is the step to create the actual databases and information about granting privileges to that database. And then the rest of the information are tips and settings that make installing easier and more smoothly for that database. Each of the database checklists will be slightly different, but they all follow a similar pattern. We talk about the client and driver that's needed, a reminder to create the database or user schema, and then information about the roles and privileges, and then remaining tips at the bottom. Let's back up for a moment and take a look at the pre-installation checklist. This list talks about several of the items we've already discussed: system requirements, hardware requirements, and the database checklists. There are a couple new items we haven't talked about yet, including installing AutoPass. This is our licensing tool, and we'll cover this in a separate video. There is also a note about IPv4 versus IPv6. All of these points are important, but the most commonly missed prerequisite is this section about IIS. Installing IIS on the server alone is not enough. We also need to enable several features, as well as installing the ASP.NET and .NET framework. Let me switch over to my test server and we'll walk through these steps together. This is my test server that we will use for our demonstration. This is a Windows Server 2016 machine. The IIS setup needs to be done from Server Manager. On a new server, this screen may pop up automatically when you connect, but if it doesn't, just go to Windows, Search, and type in Server Manager. This page might take a few minutes to load, but just be patient. When it's ready, you will see these green sections at the bottom. Once it's done, go under Manage and Add Roles and Features. This will open a little wizard. We want to just click Next a couple of times. We are trying to get to the Server Roles screen. Okay, here we are on Server Roles. At the bottom, we will open the IIS section. We'll click the arrow to expand this section and go under the Web Server section. Under Common HTTP Features, we want to make sure to select everything except WebDAV. It is very important that we do not install WebDAV. That will actually block some important operations and cause SBM not to function correctly. I already have everything installed, so that's good. Next, we will look in the Health and Diagnostics section. In here, you want to make sure to select the HTTP logging. Next, let's look at performance. Under performance, you do not need to have anything selected here, although most people will have the static content compression enabled. Next, we'll look under security. Under security, you need to have basic authentication, let's scroll down a little bit. We need Windows authentication, and we also need request filtering. If extra items are selected, that's fine. Next, we'll look under application development. In this section, we need to make sure we have the ISAPI extensions and also ISAPI filters. Finally, we'll go down to the Management Tools section. Nothing in here is required, but we do recommend that you install the IIS Management Console. To do the final install, you will just click Next, and then you'll be able to install. Everything was already selected on my machine, so I do not have anything to install. But if you added any more of the options, your install button will be enabled and you'll be able to select it. Go ahead and click the install and wait for the installation to finish. Windows will probably also ask you to reboot after the installation is finished, so go ahead and do that as well. Finally, we need to install the Microsoft.NET Framework 4.8. This can be a little bit tricky because it's not obvious when it is installed or what version is installed. The easiest way to check is to navigate out to the installation, so let's do that. We're going to right-click and go to File Explorer, and we'll navigate out to C, Windows, and go down to Microsoft.NET, and then Framework. And we're going to select the newest folder that we have. I have this bottom one is the newest. And then what we're going to do is scroll down to any of the DLL files. Here's one, and right-click on that file, choose Properties, then go to Details, and you will see the version here. So I already have the Framework version 4.8 installed. If you do not have 4.8 installed, or maybe you don't have any framework installed yet, you will want to Google and search for the .NET Framework 4.8 download and install that on your server. This framework does also ask you to reboot when it's done installing. So go ahead and reboot the server one more time to prepare. That is it for the server. Just remember, if you have more than one server, such as one test server and one production server, you will need to repeat the steps on each of the servers to prepare for the install. Before we wrap up today, I want to show you how to download the SBM files. You can download the files from the sld.microfocus.com portal. Log into the SLD portal using the same username and password that you use for the support portal. As you log in, you will be prompted to accept the terms and conditions. And then there is an additional page talking about accessing your license entitlement. Once you're logged in, check and make sure that your account name is given in the center of the page. If it's not, click on Search Account. On this page, you can click in the search bar and choose Account Name, and then enter your company name. Or you can also search for other options using your order number, your customer service ID, account number, any of the various options. Once you find your account, press Select. Now that your account is selected, go ahead and click the Download button. On the download page, select your product from the product list. Select your product again under Product Name. Finally, select the version you want to install. We'll use 12.0 as our example. At the bottom, you will see a list of all of the files that are included with this version. At the top, you will see any patch releases that are available. Patches need to be installed on top of SBM after SBM is installed. So if there are any patches available, go ahead and click Download and download those patches as well. You will see several files available. I just want to talk about a few of them. This one here is the full SBM installer. It just says installer. This is the full server and all of the various application components all in one. And you can download this. The next one I want to look at is this client installer. This is a smaller installer because it is only part of Composer, and that's the only component that is included. So the installer is everything that you will install on the server, and then the client installer is for Composer that you can install on the clients that will be doing the design changes. We'll talk more about Composer later. Then we have some API files down here. So the most important files that you want to get are the installer file and any patches that are available for this version. This is also the same portal that you will use later to generate your license keys, but we'll talk about licensing in another video. That covers the pre-installation steps for SBM. Next up, we're going to go through the actual installation on our SBM server.